is up, flick fans, Marvel fans, MCU fans, superhero fans? Today is a very special video. Today I am going through the entire Phase 1 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I am by myself. Now, my wife was going to help me with this video. She had to work today. She was on call, so she got called in. So it's just me, all by myself, all alone. But that's not going to be the case for the next two videos, because Phase 2, I have a very special guest. And the same goes for Phase 3. I cannot wait for you guys to see those videos. But as for right now, I am alone in this discussion with myself. But I don't just want to be the only one talking about these movies. I need you all in the comments section down below. Let me know what you think of Phase 1 as a whole. I am going to start at the beginning with the first Iron Man movie and move my way until the first Avengers and just talk about them. And then at the end of this video, I will be giving you guys my best and worst movies in this phase. So let's jump right into it. We are rehashing and recapping and just kind of throwing myself back to 2008 when I was in 8th grade. First off, that was the year that The Dark Knight came out. That was a very good year, but The Dark Knight wasn't the only superhero movie that dropped. We're talking Iron Man. This movie was directed by Jon Favreau, and it was really the year of Robert Downey Jr. Now, it did not bring him back from the depths of nothingness from an acting standpoint, because that is the same year as Tropic Thunder, which he got nominated for an Oscar for, guys. That's how good he was in that movie. But I look at his performance as Tony Stark, and I think he's just as good in this film. Now, superhero movies weren't taken as seriously back then, but you look at Iron Man and what it did for the genre and how it introduced this character in what I believe to be the perfect way. Now, this is not a perfect movie, albeit it's very close. I do have my issues with the third act, but in terms of what this character means to an entire generation of people, it all spawned from this film. And I said Jon Favreau, the man is just really good at what he does. Now, yes, he's Happy Hogan, but as a director, he has brought us movies like Elf, which is odd, I know, The Jungle Book, and then Iron Man. He's done about everything, and he does it all right. Now, every movie he's directed hasn't been perfect, but Iron Man is a movie that just served the character's purpose and did exactly what it needed to do for that character. Tony Stark being stuck in that cave and having to find a way out and using his intellect, which really is his superpower, to get himself out of that cave with the help of Jensen. Of course, guys, there are so many memorable moments and characters in this movie. I think the action is really well handled and directed, and I just love the look and the feel of the film. It's funny, mixed with this epic tone, mixed with this incredible amount of tension at times, and it's all balanced so well. Now, where do my issues with this movie spawn from? Well, like I said, the third act, it's not the best third act of any Marvel movie, and at the time, we didn't really have anything to compare it to, so I thought the whole movie was just the best thing ever at that age. But I look back upon it now, and there are issues with the villain of Ironmonger. Now, the performance from Jeff Bridges, I love Jeff Bridges, it's not bad at all. He's actually a really good villain in the MCU if you're holding him to those MCU standards. But where his story goes and the conventional elements of the fight scene in the third act is really the only thing about the movie that gave me problems. Otherwise, I think Iron Man is very close to the perfect origin story to this character. I don't know if they could have handled it any better. Now we move on to a movie by the name of The Incredible Hulk. That's right, guys, The Incredible Hulk. It is a part of the MCU. I have friends today that will ask me, Austin, is that Hulk movie that came out in 2008, is that a part of the MCU? And yes, it is. It is a very forgettable movie, and I think the main reason is because Edward Norton starred as Bruce Banner instead of Mark Ruffalo. Now we have Mark Ruffalo, and we're just so used to him, and we love him so much as the character. It's hard to look back upon this film and look at it as a story that takes place in this universe, but we know that's the case because we have General Ross, who has carried over into a movie like Civil War, and then we have the storyline that has been shown multiple times in movies like Iron Man 2 and the first Avengers. He's watching footage from the fight. I really enjoy elements of this movie. It's definitely not my favorite, and I will put it on the forgettable side, but I do love the battle at the end with he and Abomination. The CGI, it's not the best, but the battle itself, that fight scene is awesome. And I like what he's doing at the beginning. He's on the run. He's trying to separate himself. And we see that at the beginning of the Avengers, but this is really hardcore separation. He's living a completely different life, not using his intellect to his full abilities because he just has to sustain himself from humanity, basically, because he's so afraid of what he turns into. And then at the end of the movie, we see his full potential and his full power, and I did love that. The story itself, the overall movie as a cohesive film, it's okay. The plot is something that I don't go back to multiple times thinking, oh, that Incredible Hulk movie, it really managed to kill it in the superhero world. I didn't even say the name of the director. It's Louis Lederer. He directed this film. The direction is okay. I think the story itself is fine. Where the Hulk ends up at the end of this movie, I think, is the most intriguing part. And then, of course, that post-credit scene with Tony Stark really got everybody's blood pumping. Edward Norton was recast, and people kind of lost their minds at the beginning, but they got used to Mark Ruffalo as soon as he came on screen because he's so good as this character. The Incredible Hulk is not a movie that people like to go back to, but I encourage you, if you haven't seen it in a while, give it a chance because it may just surprise you. Now we move on to the next movie in the MCU, which is developing into the Marvel Cinematic Universe at this point, and that is the sequel to the first Iron Man. That is Iron Man 2, once again directed by Jon Favreau. Now, this is a movie that was somewhat rushed into production because they knew that they had to capitalize on the popularity of this character, but they also had to push toward to the Avengers because we knew it was on its way from that scene with Sam Jackson at the end of the first Iron Man. Iron Man 2, there are good moments in this movie. It is one of the lesser MCU films in my opinion, just because it tries its very best to get you excited for the Avengers without really capitalizing on its own story. Now, there are good parts to Whiplash. I think Whiplash is an underwhelming villain. There are good parts to the story. I think the story itself is incohesive in parts, and it tries to shoehorn too many elements to Tony Stark's story. He's having to deal with his chess piece, making him sick, deal with Nick Fury, deal with Whiplash, deal with this element of his father's past that he didn't even know about prior to the movie starting. There's just a lot that goes on in Iron Man 2, and yes, there are cool action scenes. The action scene on the racetrack is to this day one of the coolest scenes of Iron Man putting on his armor. I think the suitcase armor is crazy cool from a comic book standpoint. And then I do think the fight at the end is fun, even though it is rushed, and there's a lot of CGI elements, a lot of little minions that come in and the robots, and it's just all so rushed, and it feels so different from the first Iron Man with that epic tone, yet it balanced humor so well. This movie doesn't feel as epic. It just feels like another day in the life of Tony Stark, and they couldn't really build a movie around it, and it does not feel like a Jon Favreau film, even though he directed the movie. Is there studio meddling to blame for this? I don't know. I don't know the behind-the-scenes story. I have heard rumors that there was a lot of meddling to get this movie out in a timely fashion, and maybe that's why it is so incohesive. But at the end of the day, it is the sequel to the first Iron Man, and it does continue the story, even though I just don't think it measures up. Now we move on to the first movie in the Thor franchise and the next movie in the MCU, and that is, well, it's Thor. This was directed by Kenneth Branagh, and it is our introduction to this character, to Chris Hemsworth as this character. Now, some really weird elements if we're talking Dutch angles just all throughout the movie, and then the blonde, the dyed eyebrows. I still can't watch the movie and not be like, that's weird. But there is this fun factor to the first Thor that I don't think has been replicated in really any other movie, because there are clear issues in Thor, but I tend to overlook those when I'm watching it just because I'm having so much fun with this character and his family and the dynamic and the Warriors 3 and Lady Sif. All of those characters are awesome. Now, when he's on Earth, I think some of the humor is great. When he throws the cup down and screams, "Another!" I love stuff like that. I think other elements of humor that gets intensified in Thor the Dark World, we will talk about that tomorrow, I don't think that works as well. And you have a mix by the time you get to the third act of the movie where some things work, other things don't work, but the entire film is such a blast, and you're enjoying his character of Thor so much, and his abrasiveness, and really his journey that he goes on. His story arc in the first Thor may be one of the better story arcs in the MCU in a single film, because he goes from this abrasive jerk, really, to this character that tends to care a bit more and listens to his father at the end of the movie. Speaking of his father, Sir Anthony Hopkins, who plays Odin, is just so good in this movie. And the acting in general, one thing I love about Kenneth Branagh as a director is he pulls these performances from his actors, and all of the acting in here is great. Certain characters are wasted. I think Idris Elba, they didn't really know what they had at the time with him. He's kind of wasted, but then you look at a character like Loki and where he starts out from. He is so good, and that brother on brother, I always say this, but I love a good brotherly relationship, even if it's a bad relationship, and that relationship is handled so well. And the end of this movie, when the bridge is destroyed and Loki is screaming, "You'll never see her again," guys, it gets me choked up every time I watch it. And this is a really fun introduction in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I love the character of Thor. It all really spawned from this film, and I think Kenneth Branagh's direction brought a lot to it. Also, the score, one of the most underrated scores, theme songs in the MCU, the doo-doo, they play it at the end of Thor Ragnarok. I'm like, that's the sky, I love that. Now, this is a video full of introductions to characters that we know and love, and we move on to the next main Avenger, and that is Captain America in Captain America, the First Avenger. This is directed by Joe Johnston, who has this element of joy in his films that has yet to be replicated. I keep saying that, but they started bringing in other directors in Phase 2 and Phase 3, directors that I may even like more than these directors, but the fun aspect of Phase 1 is kind of consistent throughout every movie, and Captain America the First Avenger is a period piece, but it's a very fun and entertaining and character-driven period piece that a lot of people consider an average MCU movie, but others consider it to be one of the most underrated superhero movies of all time. Where do I fall in that conversation? I actually think I like the First Avenger more than most compared to like critic scores and the way that I felt that the audience feels about the movie, even though I don't think it's like upper echelon. It's not my top 5 or my top 8, probably is in my top 10 though, and that's because I think Captain America the First Avenger does a lot right. It does a lot right with this character. It does a lot right with the side characters, whether you're looking at Haley Atwell or Stanley Tucci. They play integral roles, important roles in his life and his relationship with Bucky, which isn't as fleshed out as I wanted it to be in this movie, but that's before we knew we were getting the Winter Soldier, and the fleshing out, it comes, but you get a good starting point in this film. And you also have a villain, when usually, like I say, the villain, they don't work super well in the MCU. I really liked Red Skull. Now, was the battle at the end a bit disappointing between those two? Yes. But as a villain consistently throughout the entire film, I think Red Skull does his job. And Hugo Weaving is really good as the character. Chris Evans just embodies this role. And at the time, even after watching this movie, he was not my favorite Avenger. Tony Stark was still my favorite. Winter Soldier is really what turned me around on him. But it didn't have to necessarily turn me around because the First Avenger gave me a really solid foundation, a really timely period piece that felt like it fit in that time, and that's one thing I think Joe Johnston brought so well to it. Yes, there are a lot of montages, and at times it feels like it's kind of highlighting over certain things that I wanted to focus a bit more on. Maybe more adventures with Cap and his crew could have been shown, but I know that wasn't the focus of the story. The focus of the story was building Cap up as this character who starts out as this weak, scrawny guy and slowly grows into something more, both physically and mentally. He starts out mentally tough, but it continues to get stronger. And by the end of the movie, when he goes into that ice, I feel the same way about this as I felt about the first Thor. The emotional gut punch when he is on the phone. Is it a phone or is it like a little walkie-talkie? With Peggy Carter just hit me. And when he wakes up in the future, the ending and just the music underneath that is playing when he's talking to Nick Fury, it just gets me. I think it was so well executed. And this was the first time when I was watching this, I said to myself, this is going to go farther than just the superhero genre. This is going to start tackling the emotional aspect of what it means to resonate with an audience member and a critic. And Captain America the First Avenger, for me, does that very well. Now we come to the final movie in this phase, and this is the Avengers. Now, I know you guys have probably heard me talk about this movie before. I love it so much. Do I love it as much today as I did maybe a year or 2 years ago? No, but let me explain this. I think The Avengers is a movie that will stand the test of time from many different standpoints. But when you look at it compared to what the Russo brothers are doing now from a directing standpoint, as much as I love Joss Whedon and I applaud him and I bow down, sir, you gave us the first culmination of all of these superheroes and you handled it so well. And it does feel the most comic booky of any of these comic book team up movies where the heroes all come together. I will absolutely give it that. But I love the Russos' directing style. I just like their camera work better. I like the look of their films a bit better. They feel more grounded, even though you're dealing with these comic book characters. It all comes down to personal taste. A lot of people are going to disagree with me on that and prefer the first Avengers and even Avengers Age of Ultron, and that's okay. Listen, I think the fact that you have two different and very distinct directing styles, yet you can deliver movies that feel like they belong in the same universe and feel like the continuity is there with the characters, because I went back and watched the first Avengers the other day. I'm actually going back and watching all of the team-up movies before Endgame, and we'll talk about that at the end of the video. And one thing I noticed going back and watching these first two Avengers films is the progression of Tony Stark and Captain America really shines through above everything else. Where he starts out, Tony Stark specifically, at the beginning of Avengers, this fun-loving and, jabbing at the Hulk and talking smack to Captain America, but kind of playing nice. And then in Age of Ultron, when he's still playing nice at the beginning, but as the movie goes on and he starts to see what could happen to his team at that point, he starts to get more serious. And then you get into Civil War, and then you get into Avengers Infinity War, and he is a completely different character, but you buy it because his arc is there. And the fact that you have completely different directors handling all of these movies and the arcs, the progression, feels so natural within these characters. I have to give it to Kevin Feige. I have to give it to all of these filmmakers and the writers, Marcus and McFeely. They do such a wonderful job of bringing these characters to life. But it all really spawned from the origin movies, of course, but it all really spawned from the Avengers, and seeing that you can do a movie on this scale like this for the first time and deliver on the development and the acting and the directing and the action scenes, one of the best third acts in any Marvel, any superhero movie of all time, tells me that the first Avengers will stand the test of time, and it is such an awesome movie. Still to this day, my number one theater experience of my life. My friend ran on top of a car. Wasn't his car. Probably shouldn't have done that, but I was right there screaming with him, man. We were all yelling to the top of our lungs when Hulk takes Loki and just slams him around everywhere. We were losing our minds, and I'm sure many others were. But now we have younger kids who weren't able to watch this movie in the theaters, and they are watching this movie now, preparing for Avengers Endgame. And Infinity War may have been there, but Endgame will be their Avengers experience that I had, and they get to freak out in the theater, and that makes me truly happy. It makes me wish I had a kid who could experience Endgame with me in the theater, but I'm not there yet in my life. I will get there one day. Whew, you guys think this video is long? Wait till my next two, but we are done talking about Phase 1. We went from Iron Man to the Avengers, and now we are at the end of this video, but I still have to give you guys my best and worst of Phase 1. You probably know where I'm going with this. I just talked about it. My best is the Avengers, still in my top echelon of the MCU movies, and I just love it so much. What it did for the genre, what it did for superheroes. I don't want to keep hashing on it because I've already talked about it. Tell me in the comment section down below, do you love the Avengers and why? Do you not like it as much as I like it and why? I would love to hear your thoughts. And then for least favorite, I'm definitely going with Iron Man 2, and a close second to the Incredible Hulk, but I do think there are more elements of the Incredible Hulk that are stronger from a filmmaking perspective. Iron Man 2 it was very choppy for me, and as a follow-up to Iron Man 1, it does not work near as well, even though, once again, it's not a horrible film. I don't think any movie in the MCU is like the worst movie I've ever seen. No, there's not really a bad one in the bunch. You just have your Iron Man 2s, and it's like, that's not a very good movie, and Thor the Dark World, and it's just like, I'm falling asleep while I'm watching this. You get those every now and then. Every studio has a clunker. It's just the MCU doesn't have a major one. They just have minor ones, and I'm okay with that. Let's keep that trend going, especially getting prepared for Endgame. What a transition. Guys, Endgame is very close. I'm releasing this video on Friday. Endgame officially comes out 6 days from now, and next Thursday, around probably 9 or 10 o'clock, I will be giving you guys my review of Avengers Endgame, and I could not be more excited. I was laying down the other night sitting and thinking, how in the world did we get here? I mean, this is it. Who's going to die, who's not going to die? I'm going to be talking about that all next week when I do my theories and speculation video. Hopefully I'm right. Actually, hopefully I'm wrong, because my predictions are kind of sad. But I'm excited to see what you guys think in the comments down below. And are you tuning in tomorrow morning? That's right, Saturday morning. Sean Chandler joins me on this channel talking about Phase 2. And then next week, at some point in the week, I will be joined by Chris from 3C Films, two awesome guests. Sorry I had to do this one by myself. I wish my lovely wife could have joined me. She had to work today. God bless her. But I'm here talking about the MCU. You guys are the absolute best. Thanks for dealing with me for this long. This was such a fun video, and I want to see your comments down below. I will catch you guys very soon.